I'm pointing this out because I believe, and now I'm heading to the question for Del. It doesn't matter what we build if we're not talking defense. And instead of me once again coming on and saying defense is the biggest problem, we need to talk about it. I'm in spaces they refuse. Now I'm going to actually have us talk about it. The idea, first of all, that this is the most important conversation we should be having before we even move to economy. I mean, we are capable of having all the conversations, but if we have all the other conversations and not this one, we're still at a point of weakness.
So when we talk about, Pan-African industrial policy and development and this opportunity we have, a big component of it is how do you protect your Pan-African vision, not just as an intellectual idea, but how do you physically protect it? You protect your infrastructure because it will be sabotaged. You protect your scientists that will actually be the lifeblood of economic development. More important than oil or gold will be your scientists who will be innovating and developing and keeping your industrial and agricultural capabilities moving forward. So defense is a big part of it. And when you start from scratch, from a position of full dependence, military dependence, you're already in a weak position, right? And this is the reality of the vast majority of our defensive capabilities on the African continent. We're relying completely on technology that is imported from the major arms manufacturers in the global north. So the question becomes, how do we produce our own technological capabilities in the defense industry? And that's why you have to go back to the foundation. You can't do this without education. You can't have a defense industry or industrialization period without an energy system, without research and development systems that don't just feed into military spending, because that's also an economic drain on resources. But you have to have an economic system that generates economic activity in the private sector that delivers better quality of life and health and so on, but also can feed into developing regional defense capabilities. Once again, African countries, one by one, cannot become sovereign on the defense side by themselves, because military equipment is pretty expensive to manufacture. The research and development that needs to go into it is, why replicate it 54 times when you can do it as a regional cooperation endeavor and actually leverage the complementarity of resources and capabilities? But that also means, as you do this, you assert your actual territorial sovereignty. Because when you have foreign military bases scattered all over the continent and satellites, controlling every single move of every single African on the continent, supposedly for security reasons, then you're vulnerable, right? So all of this is heavy lifting that cannot be done one country at a time and cannot be done in isolation of the economic system, right? So it's like building an aircraft and flying it at the same time. You can't do industry without agriculture. You can't do agriculture without energy. You can't do energy without water. And you can't do any of this without defense. And you can't do defense without industry, without energy, without education, and all of that. So all of these things have to be done at the same time, which is why this is not something that ministers of defense in Africa are going to resolve, because it's beyond their pay grade, so to speak, because they have to coordinate with ministries of agriculture, ministries of finance, ministries of research and development and education, not only in their own country, but across the continent, which means their boss, the president, has to have this conversation at the national level with all their ministries, and has to have this conversation with their counterparts in neighboring countries, so that we start coordinating across all ministries and operate as a federal Pan-African governance system that is sovereign that is complementary. And so that's why these conversations need to start at a head of state level. And it's overwhelming, and it's a big conversation. But if we don't have it at the heads of state level, where is it going to happen? And the civil society level, it's not going to go anywhere, right? Is it going to happen on podcasts and webinars and things like that? Well, of course, it's nice to have these conversations to generate knowledge and generate strategies and so on. But activating these strategies requires heads of states who fully understand and absorb and believe in these kinds of strategies.
This is basically why we need, sorry, Nico, this is basically why we need the lights, the thinkers, like the guys from the AES, because like you said, they've absorbed and they've understood that this is basically the way forward.
Yeah.
If only we can get more African leaders. And this is for those people watching. If your leaders, and I've said this on the podcast before, if your leaders are not thinking like the AES trio, then know straight out that they are compromised. They are basically hegemonic gatekeepers if they're not thinking like the others. So basically, because it's what Fadel said is just so, it's not easy, like you said, but if we start thinking that way, it's a start. And that could galvanize, because we have the youth, like I said, we have the youngest youth population in the world. And imagine the trigger if we have leaders who are actually thinking this way. Imagine the backing and the immense power that the youth have behind it. You know how powerful that is?
Yeah.
And this is why we Africans are not thinking. We're thinking so individualistic that we're not thinking collectively how we can actually pull all these things together. And this is the key. Because once Africa unites, it's game over for the rest, for the global north. And they do not want that. That's why they're doing everything they can to keep things the way it is. And we Africans need to look beyond that. We need to understand that we cannot keep doing the same thing over and over again and expect different results. It's insanity.
Yeah, absolutely. And the fact that this is not easy. I mean, this is why we call it a struggle. I mean, we call it independence struggle, not for the lack of words, but because it is a struggle. If it was easy, it would have been done. And that means that political leaders today who are not fit for a struggle, in some cases literally not fit because they're 80 years old or older, and they really need to step aside and
Yep.
enjoy their retirement in the village or at the beach or whatever, and have younger political leaders who are fit for the struggle, who are ready for this really challenging job. I mean, we're not talking about easy work here. This is not an easy ride. So we also have to give our political leaders some grace, those who actually choose to take this pathway of actually working hard to build this Pan-African consensus. That it's not easy, and it's not going to be without obstacles, but it's easier when they commit to it. It's easier when they have the backing and support and engagement of the push from below, of the labor movement, of civil society. It doesn't mean that we agree with everything they do and we support them blindly. No, but we engage in critical thinking. We engage in collectively identifying the obstacles, the blind spots, the distractions, with the collective idea of protecting the vision, not protecting individuals, not protecting interests. And that's the only way we can succeed. But it's a struggle.